So, guys, this is a topic that I hope you will enjoy. I consider myself as like a futurist. So I really love dreaming about the future, especially when I think of my continent and I dream about like the things that we could become. I'm excited to talk about this topic. I've framed it around a term called African Renaissance.
Yeah.
Right? And the word Renaissance means rebirth. So this term was coined in the 1960s by a historian and an anthropologist from Senegal called Sheikh Anta Diop, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he wrote a series of essays about this idea, right? Around the time, the president had like this dream of like this museum that was going to capture the idea of the African Renaissance and stuff like that. And Thabo Mbeki, our former president of South Africa, he also loves speaking about this topic. And I just want to say a quote to you guys that I love. This is from his 1996 speech, I Am an African. I am born of a people who are heroes and heroines, patient because history is on their side. These masses do not despair because today the weather is bad, nor do they turn triumphalist when tomorrow the sun shines. Whatever the circumstances they have lived through, and because of that experience, they are determined to define for themselves who they are and who they should be. So, my first question to you guys is, how does that quote resonate with you? How does the idea of the rebirth of the African continent resonate with you?
I'm struck by the notion of defining who we are and who we should be. It does become important for us to define who we are. And not so much because we don't know who we are, but because other people have come in and tried to tell us differently. It's almost just a reclaiming and naming what is already there. You know, I think about the Black is Beautiful movement that happened in the South African context and even in the US, and the power of that movement was in that process of reclaiming that which is already.
I like that.
And naming that beauty that is ours, you know. And even in the South African context, I find it interesting because I think the Black is Beautiful movement was happening around the same time as the Soweto uprisings in the 70s, and with Steve Biko and the Black consciousness movement. And a big part of what was happening during that time was naming who we are. Was naming who we are. Was naming who we are. You know, like that was a big part of it. You know, and even like, you know, like Biko, it's like those are the narratives that they wanted to tell. Like we are a people with a history. You know?
I love how you said that we're kind of reclaiming what already is. And I watched an interview that Sheikh Anta Diop did, and he was saying, so the interviewer was asking, how do you feel about all these European scientists coming in and saying, you know, and trying to dispel your research and you know what you're saying, because he was really big on making sure Africans understood that we're a powerful people. There's no genetic makeup about us that makes us an inferior race, you know? And his answer was, this isn't for them. This is not for them. This is for my people. I want Africans to know that we were there. We were at the forefront of civilization. We were the first scientists. We were the first mathematicians. We're the, you know, like we started, intelligence is innate in us. And I kind of am wondering, in terms of this quote, when was this quote made? Because we're talking Anta Diop and Nkrumah and, you know, all these, I guess, Pan-Africanists came out like in the 1960s, just 70s, around there. when was this quote said?
In the 90s.
In the 90s. And so what has happened between the 60s and up till now? Like, why?
Yeah,
what did we...
That's a good question. I cannot speak to that.
I think like the independence of like the first African countries was happening around the 60s.
Yeah.
And I think the thing with the South African context is that apartheid
was just
sort of happening out of that. And I think...
And we almost like emerged later with those ideas.
All the ideas were there.
Except they were there because
they were there. They were there. They just weren't given the forefront.
Becky.
Speaking
at this point, we were experiencing our moment of liberation. So the importance of even drawing from what other Africans have already named, you know? And so building on that legacy and like pulling that dream, that vision forward. That's also even important when you think about the involvement of other African countries and how they supported us and, you know, giving us passport, education.
It just came to me, like, I grew up in Botswana where I was actually pretty oblivious. I knew about apartheid, but I was really oblivious as to what was going on in South Africa. And I remember when I moved to South Africa for college, I was really taken aback by just how there was a sense of pride, like this South African pride. And it blew me away how patriotic South Africans were, like, you know, just really claiming, even, you know, that when we went through that phase where like you're wearing t-shirts that said Lion or like, you know, like South African brands that were, you know, remember that phase? And so that really struck me, and it was almost a blessing. And if you speak about African Renaissance or rebirth, I think that South Africa going through its so late stage, because I know that in Botswana, we then started to think, why aren't we more patriotic? You know, and it's coming kind of like this kind of complacency where we had this movement in the 1960s and now we're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, we are where we are. And then South Africa comes up and they're like, yeah, now they're, you know, bringing that back to the forefront. And, you know, other African nations need to also look back and reflect on, oh, where are we now on that African Renaissance?
There is a certain like intensity and intention at the beginning of independence, like when a new freedom is emerging, and then after that it sort of like slows down. So maybe the need for like kind of how do we contain, how do we like energize?
Does it need to be a constant rebirth?
That's interesting. I mean, I want to kind of go back a little bit though to what you guys were talking about in terms of like we have always had this greatness as Africans. You know, it's not something new that we're talking about. Like a rebirth is a rebirth not because we are creating something that never was. You know, it was always there. And so I want to speak more about that because I wanted to touch on what they're doing in Senegal with this museum that has opened called the Museum of Black Civilizations. And this is like a 50-year project in the making. And they also went through their own phase of like, you know, in the 60s, it was like something exciting that they wanted to do. And then it kind of like lost momentum and whatever. And now it's finally here. And the idea is to kind of take back the history of Africa or the narrative of the African history from our own perspective. I find that so fascinating that it's almost like a lot of us have forgotten our former greatness. You know, because we're in this time, like in that quote, it says we're currently in a period or emerging from a period where the weather was bad. It's almost like we've lost sight of who we always were. And we need to like reteach ourselves, you know.
There's actually this quote that comes to my mind. I don't know if I'll phrase it properly, but it's like a quote by Frans Fanon. And he says basically once things are also restored in the most material sense, we will be able to step even more into that, because I think going back to the question of what has happened to us, right, is like colonization was first, an economic
Yeah.
project,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was stained through the oppression.
Yeah.
And so, as we think about what it means for us to go full circle on the journey, it is also necessarily like a material liberation.
Yeah.
Whatever sense that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Senegal is finding that they have to go to France and England and ask them for like all of our art back.
Yeah.
Be like, you guys who made us believe that we haven't always been doing amazing artwork, we haven't been having these amazing discoveries in science and maths and whatever. So it's like we have to go and like reclaim it and remind ourselves. The Renaissance is about us sort of remembering that and continuing in that.
These things are great, like the whole African Renaissance Monument and the museum. And I remember you mentioned that Zambia has a museum that they're putting up. That's great. And when we speak of the African Renaissance, it's almost as if the whole thing is about reclaiming history. Or what about making sure we have a good hold on the future? Or does the Renaissance have to be a reclaiming of the past?
I mean, I think so. You know what Steve Biko would talk about is that a people without a history are not proud. So I think it's getting in touch with who we are based on like getting back in touch with our history. And then you sort of have like this base to start from where your assumed identity is that you are valid and you have dignity.
Yeah.
And then from there, you're almost empowered to dream and to look to the future.
The quote that comes to mind for me is James Baldwin's, the past is always present. And I think even with Kwame Nkrumah's notion of neocolonialism, right, which is, colonialism as it exists today, I think these narratives are saying that the reality is something has happened to us.
Yeah.
And in order for us to be present to the present, in order for us to live into the future, we have to live within that tension, that discomfort of what has happened to us. And so for me, when I think about the future, we cannot go into the future without also knowing what has happened to us. And I think that's how we are able to really create the kind of future that we want.
Yeah.